So we got the first red. So we're back in the
Yes, back in the Helderberg.
Helderberg here, the Heldervallei. So this is one of the most serious Cinsaults that I think's released every year. It baffles me every year when I taste it that it doesn't taste that much like the other Cinsaults that surround it essentially, and from other producers in a similar area. I mean, let alone in Darling or the Swartland, that tastes completely different from there.
Yeah.
But even the other Stellenbosch Cinsaults that we sell, it sits apart as a much more savoury, much more concentrated example of the variety.
Yeah. No, so definitely Heldervallei for me is not just adding another Cinsault. There's a reason it's under this label as well, and it's because this vineyard, as with the other vineyards, there's something unique that stands out for me in Cinsault or Chenin or is it Pinotage that I haven't found in any other vineyard, like maybe with Cinsault. You know, this is Cinsault exposed close to the ocean, probably the Cinsault exposed to the most maritime winds that I know of. Also being on poor soils, quite small canopy, and it crops very little, just about 4 tons, and we all know this variety can crop quite a bit, so the yields are lower, and being older vines that's dry farmed, they are quite gnarled, and shoots aren't that long, leaves are a little bit smaller as well. And this builds some concentration, but also being close to the ocean, that smaller canopies doesn't really absorb too much heat. They stay fresh, so we can build up long-lasting color and intensity in this vineyard block, and also in tannin that's not really known for Cinsault too much. And I don't even do punch downs on this juice, even though this is Helderberg in its sense where we get some nice white pepperiness and intensity on Cinsault, but there's also the tannin fire that's important for Helderberg. Or from this little region, and
this is one of the vineyards that your grandfather was working with, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it was first planted in 1968. Him and his brother. So those who know my predecessor and family back then, Koos and Peter Bredell, they were quite famous port makers. So port was a big thing in this area of Stellenbosch, close to the ocean, and he used a lot of Cinsault back then to actually make some of the port wines. It was not a secret for him back then, but it was something he always was keen to develop in bringing into port. We really felt it's going to add a bit more market appeal if Cinsault could be part of port because there's a grapey note to it. But it was important for him to also do his own muscle selections of port. He took it very seriously to get the darker style Cinsault. So he would always do his own selections, and this is probably what they call a Bredell clone. We would have picked always the darkest bunches and berries. Even my father did that still in the 90s. That first Geronimo was from a muscle selection, actually a vineyard that was trained to be a port vineyard. So, but now that one is ripped out, Heldervallei.
But I get that in the DNA of this wine. It's a very interesting.
It makes sense as you hear it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Makes sense because it's got that fruit purity, but with the power.
But density, it's got density, which I don't,
Incredible tannins.
which is not something you accuse Cinsault of having often.
And these are really gravelly, serious, ripe tannins.
Yeah, they're powdery in a sense.
And
yeah.
they're dry.
Yeah.
So I mean, you said you were looking for the darkest fruit, and you go take a cutting off that
He'll
vine,
mark
and
that vine and then
yeah.
come back winter and then he'll cut it. I mean, he was
and then plant the
obsessed
cutting
with,
to replant.
Yeah, plant the
within the
cutting
vineyard,
to replant back into the vineyard. This vineyard was later fully replanted in '88 with what would have been from selections from that.
Okay.
But he was known to do it. I mean, we would sit Sundays at the lunch table, and if you had maybe spun speck or melon or something that was very sweet, or watermelon, and you made a comment that it was good, he'll come by and ask you to spit the seed in his hand so he can propagate it in his back garden. So he was always doing plant improvement. He just loved it. So he was obsessed with it.
He wasn't hanging out at septic tanks that often, hopefully.
So, yeah, I mean, that's the character of him, and I think it shows still today in this vineyard. And I don't want to lose that character. It can easy to be just making another perfumed light Cinsault is not what I wanted to do with Heldervallei. I want this to be Heldervallei. This is a unique vineyard with that tannin. And I mean, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. You can take any vineyard and probably make from the same vineyard a few different ones. You could harvest a bit earlier and try and smooth out that tannin by doing some other techniques. But yeah, that's the attribute that I find is unique. I want to expose it, but still have the balance and length to carry it. Slow, long fermentations on this, no punch downs, slight bump overs, work a little bit reductively, old barrels on the lease, 11 months, then bottled.
What's your volume on this?
This is about 1,300 bottles, yeah. So this is my smallest parcel of vineyard that I work with, only 0.4 hectares.
And where's your alcohol on this one? 13 something?
No, it's about 12.7, 12.9.
That's incredible concentration for that alcohol.
And it's the 1st of March. This ripened 2 weeks later than the previous vintage, so for me it's definitely the most intense that I've had this as a vintage.
Have been up there or not?
Yeah, extracts definitely. Yeah. About 2 weeks longer on the vine without having sugar ripeness going past there, but intensity of color and aroma development.
Smart one. I'd like to see this in 20 years' time.
Really smart. And I think you can see the elements of the slightly more reduced handling as well, more reductive handling.
Because
Just giving that little edge of the
very
racking.
little whole bunch. I mean,
30% at most, but there's definitely stems involved with crushed, so whole bunch crushed. Yeah.
so not no kind of
No semi-carbonic. Yeah.
Because that will make it too fruity.
Yeah.
Yeah, mooi. Baie smart. Well, then you've got a job now to make sure you propagate that vineyard going forward, eh? Or was that
Yeah.
Kleintjes' job?
No.
That's the cousin's job.
Trying our best there. No. I'm trying to take as good care as possible. It's a vineyard that's quite exposed to erosion, so cover cropping in years is paramount. Yeah, so a lot of vines gets damage in the middle because it's kind of on the hill, but there's a little ravine that wants to always cut through there. So there's a lot of work to protect this vineyard from.
So is this
getting
around the corner from Grenitstein?
right next to Granitstein, yeah. So
No, very exciting.
on the same contours as well.